Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. It's good to sit down a couple times a week and go over some of the things that are taking place here in the great gem state. And right now, medical freedom is one of the issues before the Idaho legislature. Now, this is actually a bill that has been introduced for, I think it's a little over a month, but it has some very far reaching implications, and we're going to talk about why your medical freedom matters in just a few moments.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. You know, a lot of us would like to forget everything that happened, well, about 5 years ago with the lockdowns and then the mandates that followed, all of the COVID drama. It was scary because we really didn't know what the outcome was going to be. But in hindsight, now we have 5 years to look back and see what was done. And it's very clear that there were a lot of people who were just flying by the seat of their pants and asserting authority that really wasn't theirs to assert. Whether that was public health authorities, whether it was people in government, even in private business, there were people who were just like, well, we have to do whatever, the experts are saying and believe the science and so forth. And it turns out so many of them are wrong. I'm not trying to tell you you should be a conspiracy theorist, but at least an honest person would admit the conspiracy theorists seem to be batting a pretty high average in terms of what they got right about COVID, which brings us to the topic of medical freedom. Why is it so important that we put the necessary stopgaps in place to prevent anyone from making the same kind of mistakes? I'm being generous here, the kind of mistakes that were made in the name of protecting the public health 5 years ago and persisting for even a couple of years after they were first implemented. So let's talk about medical freedom and specifically Senate Bill 1023. This is from Senator Dan Foreman. The Idaho Freedom Foundation says he presented legislation to protect health freedom, something that IFF has advocated for a long time. Now, this bill would prevent denial of health care for refusing a vaccine, a right of informed consent before being given any experimental drug, and of course, prevent administering of any medical treatment without informed written consent. This would seem to be a no-brainer, but people struggle with it, as you're going to see, because some of the opposition that's been expressed to Senator Foreman's bill, I know it's couched in the idea of, well, this is just common sense. We're just trying to be careful. But if you look closely, you'll see there's just a tinge of hysteria that this might take away my ability to force something I want to force on other people. And when it comes to medical decisions, that is something you really just cannot do. So let's go into some of the details about why this bill is not only worth considering, but it's actually a very good bill in many respects. So this is the Idaho Freedom Index breakdown of Senate Bill 1023 regarding medical freedom. Just the down and dirty. The bill description, Senate Bill 1023 would amend Idaho's Coronavirus Stop Act, I believe that was enacted back in 2023, to protect individual medical freedom against all vaccine mandates. Now, 2 Senate amendments to Senate Bill 1023 were adopted, so it has been amended, but as I understand it, the amendments really are not that bad, and the analysis has been updated to reflect that. It didn't change the bill's rating in the least. So let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts of what this bill would do. Senate Bill 1023 would rename Chapter 5, Title 73 Idaho Code, currently called the Coronavirus Stop Act, to the Idaho Medical Freedom Act, and make numerous amendments throughout to broaden its protections. So, for instance, the bill would strike specific references to the coronavirus and the coronavirus vaccination using the term medical intervention instead. This is really smart because, hey, it may not be a coronavirus next time that tempts somebody to abuse their power. And the bill instead will define medical intervention as a procedure, treatment, device, drug injection, medication, or action taken to diagnose, prevent, or cure a disease or alter the health or biological function of a person. So that should include any vaccination whatsoever. By updating Idaho's existing law against coronavirus vaccine mandates, this bill effectively bans all vaccination mandates with certain exceptions discussed under the federalism metric that is listed below in this analysis. You can check this out for yourself at idahofreedom.org. Again, this is Senate Bill 1023. So Senate Bill 1023 broadly defines the term school and declares that a school operating in the state shall not mandate a medical intervention for any person to attend school, enter campus or school buildings, or be employed by the school. In other words, educational institutions are now prohibited or would be prohibited from violating an individual's medical freedom. So let me ask, why would this matter? Because that became kind of the de facto purity test for are you good enough to attend this school, is when students tried to return following the lockdowns. Oftentimes it was on the condition of you have to show proof that you were vaccinated. Now, that's fine for those who want to be vaccinated, but what about those who don't? They may have perfectly good reasons for refusing that. And after all, it is their choice, right? It's their body. It's their choice. They should be able to make those kind of decisions. So to coerce them and say, well, you can't attend, and this happened, of course, to people in their jobs as well. How many people do you know who had to make that choice? Get the job or get the jab rather, or lose your job? Not a good thing. This is what we're seeking to head off. Again, not just in the name of the coronavirus, but any other virus that might tempt people in authority to try to mandate something against a person's better judgment. Throughout Senate Bill 1023, we find repeated deference to federal law, including blanket exemptions for entities that receive Medicaid or Medicare or Medicaid funding. Now, this is a problem, and this is a good one to be pointed out. Kudos to Parrish Miller for pointing this out here. Another subsection says the prohibition on medical interventions shall not apply to any situation where personal protective equipment, items, or clothing are required by employers in the public or private sectors based on existing traditional and accepted industry standards or federal law. So, now, I mean, look, there's simply in the surgical theater, yes, you want people wearing that personal protective equipment, but this also opens it up to some mischief. And this is one of the things that Parrish points out here is it's problematic when a bill incorporates changeable federal laws into Idaho statutes or rules. But it's particularly inexcusable when it doesn't cite any specific federal laws or regulations. Instead, necessary protections of individual rights are subjected to a generic exception of unless required by federal law. Sometimes federal law doesn't do a very good job of protecting those individual rights. So let's talk about, this is reporting from the Idaho Capital Sun, and this is pretty straightforward. This paragraph of Foreman's bill called the Idaho Medical Freedom Act would modify an Idaho law passed in 2023 that banned business and state and local governments from requiring COVID-19 vaccines as a condition of employment or to provide products or services, including entrance to venues. In addition to proposing to extend the ban to schools, the bill would broaden the law to include medical interventions, which it defines as any pharmaceutical or biological agent or product designed to alter or restrict the biological functioning of the body. So basically, if it's requiring this of you, they're not going to be allowed to do this under Senate Bill 1023. But listen to some of these objections. I thought this was really interesting. Some worried that this could even affect hand sanitation requirements. Oh no! The restaurant I go to, no longer do the employees have to wash their hands after using the bathroom. Is that the conclusion we're supposed to draw? It just seems like it's always taken to the furthest extreme, and well, there's no common sense left, and you could have people going back with, hands just fresh from cleaning out the stables and fixing food. So, but look who's doing the complaining, and this will tell you part of the problem. This is Alex LeBeau, president of the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. Hello, IACI. Imagine finding you in commenting on a bill like this. Alex LeBeau says this bill goes too far by mandating businesses submit to the whims of their employees. Well, is it the employees telling the business, you have to do this, you have to do that, or is it the employees being able to assert their authority over their own bodies? There's a big difference there. We do not understand the language, and we believe that while it was thought out, we believe perhaps there was some haste in how it was written. Again, we've had 5 years to kind of suss this out. I think this one rings a little bit hollow. Here's another objection. This was when all but 2 senators on the Senate State Affairs Committee supported a motion to send the bill to the amending order where any lawmaker could propose amendments. Committee Chair Jim Guthrie and Idaho Senate Assistant Minority Leader James Ruchte voted against the motion. Listen to Ruchte's comment here, though. This is the hysterical part to me. In the meeting, Ruchte, the only Democrat on the committee, said the legislation seems like it's putting us in a race to bring back the diseases our grandparents worked so hard to eliminate. Really, is that what it's about? Were those diseases eliminated only because the government or someone in authority exercised power to compel people to do whatever they thought was in their best interest against their will? because that seems to be the case for what he's making. Now let's get down to brass tacks. Why is it important to have this medical freedom? Well, I think this is possibly the best explanation that I've seen. Foreman spoke briefly about the bill, but it was Health Freedom Defense Fund president and founder Leslie Mnookin who said Foreman wrote the bill, and she spoke about the need for the bill. Listen to how she frames this. The right to make one's own medical decisions is not granted by government. It is a sacred, God-given, inalienable right woven into the very fabric of our constitutional republic. She told lawmakers, it's amazing to me that we veered so far from that original intention that we even have to talk about this today. And yet here we are. So yes, we have strayed from our roots. We've strayed from the understanding of what God-given rights are. But most importantly, we've strayed from the understanding of why people need to be able to make these decisions for themselves rather than be coerced by somebody who, acting in the name of science or some other kind of expertise, want to force a solution on them. There are risks involved in some of these medical interventions, and people need to be able to say no, as well as to say, sure, that sounds good to me, but it needs to be their choice, and they shouldn't be coerced, and they shouldn't be otherwise leveraged into decisions that are against their best self-interest. So Idaho deserves medical freedom. We've taken it for granted. We learned about 5 years ago that's something we probably shouldn't do. Some steps have been taken to correct this. Let's take this next step to make sure that the proper blockades are in place to prevent any kind of mischief like that from ever happening again. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.